Hello everybody and welcome back to the Tomb Raider Underworld walkthrough. It's time to finish our journey through southern Mexico. As soon as I can get on the motorbike, that would be helpful. Now, it is very important to avoid a very annoying bug to just be very careful in this final area. Because really it's the last of the kind of major bugs that the game has. So, at the end of the Midgard Serpent chapter, which is pretty much now, we will be able to pick up an artifact, or at least at some point very shortly we'll be able to pick up an artifact which, if you die after that point, it is highly possible that that artifact will go missing. And said artifact is this skull that is sitting on the floor. Well, not the skull, the thing next to it. Or at least that's the key that opens the level exit. Basically, that can disappear if you pick it up now and die after this point. Apparently there's also something else about another artifact. Not 100% sure. But basically, don't pick that thing up. Just leave it until you're leaving. Otherwise, it's very possible that you might screw yourself over.
The Midgard serpent Jormungandr that lies on the bottom of the ocean, encircling all the world. Coming of Ragnarok, Jormungandr thrashes beneath the sea, flooding the land and vomiting its deadly poison into the air. The final battle of the gods. Thor kills Jormungandr with his hammer, Mjolnir, but then he retreats only 9 steps before he succumbs to the serpent's venom.
So, yeah, we basically have the Norse mythology there. Nice and simple, really. And also we have this terrifying stuff.
Midgard's serpent. All these ancient sites inspired underworld myths in later cultures. Perhaps because they were all protected by the Walking Dead.
And we are about to be introduced to that very stuff of the Walking Dead. We've already had these wonderful jaguar thralls, but they aren't the only things we'll be facing. Now, apparently it's also possible that if you die and reload during this level, all of the health items that you will have collected previously will disappear from your inventory. It's not a big deal, but it can be quite annoying. I think that pretty much covers it. But there we go! We have Mayan thralls. Or at least Mayan warrior thralls, because that's what they technically are. Now, they can be annoying, but they're about the same as the other thralls. Violent, but manageable. There are going to be some slightly more frustrating enemies later on, but this is about as bad as it gets for the time being. The rather frustrating thing is that you're going to be put up against quite a lot of these guys. Now, something that I hadn't done at any point before in combat is that you are able to use your adrenaline power stuff to attack your enemies, but not to do the adrenaline headshot. It's not the most helpful thing in the world, but it may allow you to get out of a scrape if you're a little bit trapped. But anyway, now is probably a decent time to go in and talk about Jormungandr. Something that is entirely what this area is about. Because it's the Midgard Serpent, or the World Serpent, and it's very, very, very central to Norse mythology, as you heard in Lara's little recap of what that picture was telling us. So, Jormungandr is the middle child of the giantess Angrboda and Loki. Now, according to the Prose Edda, Odin took Loki's 3 children by Angrboda, the wolf Fenrir, then Hel and Jormungandr, and then tossed Jormungandr into the great ocean that encircled Midgard. And, as I've said before, Midgard is sort of the middle enclosure, Middle Earth, essentially. And it's the world of the humans. So basically it's Earth. What happened because of that is that Jormungandr grew incredibly large, so large in fact that he was able to surround the Earth and grasp his own tail. And so he received the name the Midgard Serpent, or the World Serpent. What's slightly frustrating though is that when he lets go of his tail, the world will end. And Jormungandr's archenemy is the god Thor, because that's all of that. Now, there are apparently 3 preserved myths which detail Thor's encounters with Jormungandr. One is something called lifting the cat. So Thor encounters the serpent in the form of a colossal cat, disguised by the magic of the giant king Utgarda Loki, who challenges him to lift the cat as a test of strength. He's unable to lift the monstrous creature, but does manage to raise it far enough that it lets go of the ground with one of its 4 feet. And then, when Utgarda Loki later explains his deception, he describes Thor's lifting of the cat as an impressive deed. Then you have Thor's fishing trip, which sounds like a lovely children's book. So, Thor goes fishing with the giant Hymir, or Hymer, whatever. But when Hymer refuses to provide Thor with bait, Thor strikes the head off Hymer's largest ox, and uses that as his bait. They then row to a point where Hymer just kind of... Oh, well, they row to a point. It's a very important difference. So they row to a point where Hymer often sat and caught flatfish, where he drew up 2 whales, but Thor demands to go further out to sea, and does so despite the warnings. Thor then prepares a strong line and a large hook, and baits it with the ox head, which Jormungandr then bites. Thor pulls the serpent from the water, and the 2 face one another, Jormungandr dribbling poison and blood. Hymer goes pale with fear, and Thor grabs his hammer to kill the serpent. The giant cuts the line, and they leave the serpent to sink beneath the waves. Apparently, that particular encounter with Thor seems to be the one most popular in Norse art. There are 4 picture stones that have been linked with the myth, which are the Altuna runestone, the Ardra 8 image stone, the Hordum stone, and the Gosforth cross. So it's an important motif. And then the final myth, including Jormungandr, is Ragnarok, so the last meeting between the serpent and Thor, which is predicted to occur at Ragnarok, which is the end of the world, or at least the end of the Norse mythology, essentially. When Jormungandr will come out of the ocean and poison the sky, Thor will kill Jormungandr and then walk 9 paces before falling dead, having been poisoned by the serpent's venom. So it's all kind of very important. And Lara basically did just cover everything. I just got the chance to go into stuff in a little bit more detail. Now, the mysterious blue liquid that you see before you is instant death if you fall into it, so be very, very, very careful. And while I don't think that the game necessarily ever explicitly says what this stuff is, may do in a couple of notey things. It is Aether, which is EITR. It's a mythical liquid substance in Norse mythology. It's apparently the origin of all living things. So the first giant Ymir was conceived from Aether. It's supposed to be very, very poisonous and is produced by Jormungandr and other serpents. So this is where the Midgard serpent, Jormungandr, evil liquid, poison from the sky, so on and so forth, comes from. Now, the word exists in quite a number of languages, and it's kind of broadly translated as poisonous, evil, bad, angry, sinister, and so on. But the moment that it is sort of brought up in Norse texts, or at least one of the moments, is in the Vafthrudnismal. Because that's easy to say, which is the third poem in the Poetic Edda. And basically Odin asks the giant Vafthrudnir about the origin of Ymir, to which he answers, "From Eliwaves, Aether drops splashed that grew into a giant who begat all families, from which all giants come, that is why we are easily angered." And then the last line of the stanza, it said, "That is why we are easily angered," which, as I said, it's basically a wordplay with the meaning of the word Aether, as it also means anger/angry. And what's quite cool is that if you look at the Wikipedia page for Aether, whatever, Tomb Raider Underworld is mentioned, because obviously the stuff's very, very important as part of the plot here. But there we go, we've got a wonderful another statue of Thor. And we can begin our attempt to get the belt. Now, what is slightly silly, I'm not sure whether this is a mistake that I've made earlier on in, like, mishearing something earlier on in the walkthrough, but I'm pretty sure that Lara calls the belt Megingjord. And generally, I think that is what it is frequently referred to, because, I mean, when you look at Thor's belt, or at least when you look at how Megingjord is spelt, there is a letter that looks remarkably like a D. And apparently it is frequently transliterated as D, but the way it's used in the Middle Ages, or at least the way that I've always come across it, is it's TH. So it's very much like Thorn, which is, I believe I've referred to before. Now, Eth did kind of go out of fashion and is then replaced with D. I mean, it's exactly what it looks like. But pretty much it's always th. Although it has been, I think, used variously in different languages, so apparently in Welsh it represented the letter DD, which is a weird thing. And in some other things it's D, but it's mostly, or at least the way I see it is, it's mostly TH. So technically it should probably be Megan Yorth, rather than Megan Yord. I'm not sure which is quite correct, because my knowledge of these things is not great. But I would like to think that it is technically Megan Yorth. Even though I think most things would call it Megan Yord. But there we go, we have the belt. We are in the level of the Land of the Dead, so basically all of your glitches should hopefully be gone by now. And really the only thing that we have left to do is get the relic and get out of here. Now you may have noticed that the relic can be found in Thor's eye. Well, you can just about see it there. So you've got to get up there. Now, there's the way that the game wants you to do it, which is moving all these statues, well, not statues, pillars, and kind of climbing to jump on top of the hammer. But, nah, that's not the way I roll. We can go quite a lot easier than that. It's a little bit glitchy, but it's certainly a lot easier than attempting to climb to the top of the hammer. It's just complicated and silly. Because basically all you need to do is jump onto the stairs just there, which is not difficult. You do need to be careful, because even though the stream of Aether on the floor doesn't kill you, the waterfall will. So you've just got to be very careful when you are edging very close here. But what you need to do to get a very, very, very easy way of getting to the relic is cut through the gap underneath the hammer to the arm, and then you can jump up onto the top of the hammer from there. As you can see, the camera freaks the hell out. It literally has no idea what's going on. But essentially, once you manage to get up onto the top of the hammer, which just requires a little bit of patience, a little bit of clipping, there we go, we have our relic. And all we need to do is get the hell out of here. Now, I would like to go into a little bit more detail about Thor's belt. Megan Yorth, whatever, means power belt in Old Norse. And it's one of Thor's three main possessions. So you've got Mjolnir, this, and then his gloves. Or his iron glove, I should say. It's only one. I'd like to go into more on this, but there's not really a whole lot there. There's just that small little fact. There's much more stuff on the gauntlet, or the gauntlets, which are Jan Greiper, or Jan Glofa, which is the gauntlets version. Apparently, according to chapter 20 of the book Gjalfaginning, he requires the gloves to handle his powerful hammer. The reason for that may come from the forging of the hammer itself, when the dwarf working the bellows was bitten in his eye by a gadfly, which is commonly held to be Loki in disguise, which caused the handle of the hammer to be shortened. But that is also about all there is to see on the gauntlets as well. It's slightly disappointing. I mean, the only thing that anybody really cares about is Mjolnir, because that's the hammer. Because that's the weapon. Because obviously, as you will tend to see with most mythical things, people only really tend to care about the swords and the hammers and the axes. And while in the time of these myths, there was a lot of care put into the armour and the gauntlets and the belts and the greaves and all that, these days that's not how we kind of tend to care about things. Which is slightly depressing, but oh well. Now what I am attempting to do here is another little shortcut, I believe. I'm slightly nervous about trying to achieve this shortcut because, let's just say, it is a little bit of a hassle. Because basically, what the game wants you to do is kind of try and safely work your way back up. But you can cheese your way because you can grab onto this ring to get up much higher than you would be able to do normally. Now, I had a lot of trouble trying to get onto where I wanted to be. Basically, you kind of need to head that way to get to where you need to be. You're basically right at the exit. But you are under a very, very strict time limit. If you do not get onto this platform, you will fall into the A tier, and that's not good for anybody. But thankfully, once you've got into there, you'll basically get to go home free. There is one treasure which is just behind here. I believe this is our final one. Or at least there's final two, because they decided, yeah, let's just stick two right next to each other. It's a genius idea. And there we go. We have all the treasures, and we have all the relics. And I can't believe that I had been calling them artifacts for the longest time. Probably because in the first two games they are called artifacts, and then they just decided to change the name to treasures. Although I could also be incredibly wrong on that as well. That would be really embarrassing. Oh well, at least I know to call them treasures now. Oops. Now, this is the point where it's safe to pick up this Jaguar head. If you picked it up before and died at some point during the last bit of the Midgard Serpent, which it's easily possible to do, as you saw, I died many, many, many times. Basically, yeah. Just leave it until then. Now, I believe that what one of the books was referring to was moving that block there. Basically, if you die after making your potentially it can disappear from your inventory. I think that's how that works. Which basically makes beating the level impossible. But once you're past that, you're home free, really. It's just a case of just be a little bit careful when you're on your way up. Don't fall in any pits. But really, there's not a lot of challenge left. Apart from, when there's a bunch of spiders, but you can quite nicely kill them by doing this wonderful donut. Because this does actually damage them, which is quite hilarious. I believe I may have pulled a very similar trick on some Jaguars a little bit earlier. But it's always quite fun to do that. And I'm pretty sure I will also be using it on some Thralls a little bit later on as well. But yes, all we need to do is just exit Xibalba, and we are done here. And then it will be time to chase after our absolutely wonderful hammer. So I'll get to talk about Mjolnir, which is what everyone probably has been wanting. I've just not been providing it to you. Oops. Well, it's not an oops, it's not a mistake. There's no real point in trying to talk about Mjolnir when we're not getting it just yet. There's been other things to talk about. Just about. There's been a lot of blather, but we've made it through southern Mexico, and thankfully there is other stuff going on in the next level, so that is going to be an absolute godsend. Also, goddamn glitchy platforming, what are you doing to me, Tomb Raider Underworld? I know I can be a little bit off on my platforming sometimes, but I was not that off. Oh, come on. We're right at the end. I wanted a nice, cool exit from Xibalba, and you're just not giving it to me. Although I suppose it's incredibly fitting considering the standard of the commentary that you have been listening to throughout southern Mexico. I don't know why. I'm not a particular fan of southern Mexico. I mean, it's cool and all, but it's probably not one of my favourite levels. I may be completely contradicting something I may have said in an earlier part, but I don't know, it's a little bit too long for its own good. It just overstays its welcome. Which is frustrating, because why should it outstay its welcome when pretty much all of the other levels are quite nice and contained, and not quite as sprawling, apart from, you know, the opening of the Mediterranean Sea, and also what's going to be the opening of the final level, because that's a pain and a half as well. But either way, once we pull this switch, we have a very small amount of time. Well, it's not very small, but it's quite small, to jump over this gap, which I have no idea how Lara manages, and the level is complete. It's time to go locate Mjolnir.
Zip, I have everything I need to get Thor's hammer. Do you have better coordinates for me?
Yeah, I enhanced it as photos of the map. I'm uploading to immediately now.
And your other project?
Haven't tracked them down yet. I'm still working on it.
Very good. I'll call when I get to Jamnair Island.